Stories never heard before. The Lantern in the Dark. There was once a girl named Meera, who grew up in a village where electricity was rare, and nights were ruled by lanterns. Her father was a farmer, bent by years of toil, and her mother sold vegetables in the weekly market. Their house was small, with mud walls and a roof that leaked during monsoon. Yet, inside those walls, Meera carried a dream that seemed larger than the sky above her. She wanted to study science, to understand the stars, the rivers, the invisible forces that moved the world. But in her village, girls were expected to marry early, not to chase galaxies. Every evening, after finishing her chores, she would sit by a lantern and read borrowed books. The flame flickered, casting shadows on the pages, but she kept her eyes steady. Her classmates laughed at her seriousness, calling her the book girl. She didn't mind. The lantern became her companion, its glow whispering, "Keep going." Sometimes, she would imagine the flame as a tiny star, guiding her through the darkness, reminding her that even small lights could hold immense power. Her family struggled. Her father's crops often failed, and debts grew heavy. Meera wore torn clothes, carried notebooks filled with reused pages, and sometimes studied on the back of discarded calendars. She often skipped meals, so her younger siblings could eat. Yet, she never stopped reading. She believed that knowledge was a kind of light, one that could outshine poverty. At times, she would pause her studies to help her siblings with their lessons, patiently explaining sums and stories, believing that if she could lift them too, her own dream would feel lighter. One day, her school announced a district-level science fair. Meera wanted to participate, but the entry fee was beyond her family's reach. She sat quietly, folding the form with trembling hands. Her mother noticed. She sold her bangles, the only jewelry she had, and gave Meera the money. "Go," she said. "If you believe in it, we will believe too." Meera built a small model of a water purifier, using discarded bottles, sand, and charcoal. Her hands shook as she explained it to the judges, but her voice grew steady. The judges were astonished. She won first prize. For her, it was not about the medal. It was proof that her dream had weight. But life did not soften. Her father fell ill, and Meera had to take small jobs, teaching children, carrying water, helping at the market. She worked late into the night, then returned to her lantern. She whispered, "One day, I will stand in a laboratory." At 17, she applied to a prestigious science college in the city. Her father opposed it. "We cannot afford this. Stay here. Find a stable life." Meera listened, but her heart refused. She borrowed money from a neighbor, boarded a crowded bus, and left for the city with a single bag. The city was harsh. She lived in a hostel with peeling walls, ate cheap meals, and often went hungry. She attended lectures, but was mocked for her accent, her simple clothes, her village ways. "Too ordinary," they said. Each insult cut deep, but she kept going. She worked as a cleaner in a library, dusting shelves while secretly reading the books she cleaned. She sold vegetables on weekends, memorizing formulas between customers. Her life became a cycle of survival and study. Sometimes, she would walk past laboratories, where students in white coats worked with machines she had only seen in books. She would stop, stare, and whisper, "One day, I will be here." The laboratories became her silent teachers, reminding her that every discovery had once been a dream. There were nights when she returned to her hostel exhausted, her body aching, her mind clouded with doubt. Her roommates laughed at her persistence, telling her to give up and return home. But Meera would sit by the window, watching the city lights flicker, and remind herself that every rejection was only a step closer to acceptance. She began keeping a notebook, where she wrote down every failure she faced. Next to each, she scribbled a single word, Lesson. She believed that failure was not an end, but a rehearsal for resilience. That notebook became her silent companion, filled with crossed-out equations and unfinished dreams, but also with hope. One evening, after failing an important exam, she sat by the river, and wondered if her father had been right. But then she remembered her mother's words, "If you believe in it, we will believe too." She stood up, wiped her tears, and whispered, "I will not stop." At 20, she finally got a chance. A professor noticed her dedication, and offered her a small research role. The work was minor, but Meera gave it everything. Her persistence caught the professor's eye. Slowly, she began receiving more opportunities. Her experiments grew sharper, her confidence stronger. Audiences at seminars began to notice. Years passed. Meera faced struggles, but each discovery built her courage. She published papers, then presented at conferences, then joined larger projects. Her name appeared in journals. Her father, once doubtful, watched her on television, and wept quietly. Her mother sold vegetables with pride, telling neighbors, "My daughter never gave up." Meera became known not for fame alone, but for resilience. She spoke at schools, telling children, dreams are not fragile. They are seeds. They grow, if you water them, with persistence. She built a small science center in her village, where children could experiment without fear. She called it the Lantern Lab. She wanted others to have what she once lacked, a place to believe. When people asked her what success meant, she said, "It is not medals. It is not money. Success is when you become what you always wanted to be, despite everything that tried to stop you." But success did not erase her memories of struggle. She often recalled the nights when hunger gnawed at her, when rejection felt unbearable, when she almost gave up. She remembered the lantern, the torn clothes, the reused notebooks. She remembered her mother's sacrifice, her father's doubt, her siblings' silent gratitude. These memories became her compass, reminding her that resilience was not about forgetting pain, but about carrying it with dignity. She often told her students that the lantern was more than a flame, it was a symbol of persistence, a reminder that even the smallest light could guide someone through the longest night. She began mentoring young scientists in the city. She told them, "Talent matters, but persistence matters more. You will be rejected. You will be ignored. But if you keep walking, the road will open." Her words carried weight, because they were born from lived truth. She also began writing short reflections about her journey. In notebooks scattered across her desk, she wrote lines like, "Every rejection is a rehearsal for courage. Every hunger is a reminder of why I began. Every small experiment is a seed for something greater." These writings were never published, but they became her private chronicle of resilience. Sometimes, she returned to the river, where she once sat in despair. She would stand quietly, watching the water move, and whisper, "You carried me forward." The river became her symbol of persistence, always flowing, never stopping, even when obstacles stood in its way. She also began visiting schools in smaller towns, speaking to children who had never imagined science as a path. She told them stories of her lantern, her torn clothes, her reused notebooks. She reminded them that beginnings do not have to be grand to lead to greatness. Her words planted seeds in young hearts, and some of those children later wrote to her, saying, "You gave me courage to try." On some evenings, she would sit quietly in her science center, long after the children had left. She would walk across the empty hall, touch the instruments, and listen to the silence. For her, silence was not emptiness, it was memory. It carried the voices of those who had dared to learn, the laughter of children who had found confidence, the tears of those who had shared their truth. She believed that every experiment left behind an invisible rhythm, and she felt honored to be its keeper. Years later, when her hair turned gray, and her steps slowed, Meera still sat by a lantern, in her childhood home. She whispered formulas, smiled at her reflection in the flame, and said, "You carried me here." She did not leave behind medals that fade. She left behind a science center where curiosity could rise, a path where persistence could walk, and a memory that showed others, that even fragile beginnings can lead to lasting light. And so, Meera's life became a story remembered, not just for science, but for resilience. A girl who struggled, who bent but did not break, who dreamed and became. She had shown how to live. And she had also shown, how one could become, how she became, the beacon beside the ark, the guiding flame in the spark, the lantern, in the dark.